What if a single shadowy figure appears across centuries, cultures, and continents always, wearing the same shape, always accompanied by a hunting bird, and always appearing just before death, disaster, or disappearance? Tonight, we are not just telling a legend. We are trying to solve a problem historians quietly avoid. Is the Phantom Falconer a myth born from fear, or evidence of a pattern history refuses to explain? History is filled with monsters that roar, ghosts that scream, and demons that reveal themselves in fire and blood. But some legends are quieter, more disturbing precisely because they do not announce their arrival. Across medieval Europe, the Middle East, and even parts of Central Asia, witnesses described the same impossible figure, a tall, silent man cloaked in darkness, his face hidden, a falcon perched calmly on his arm. He never speaks, he never attacks, and yet wherever he is seen, something terrible follows. They called him by many names, but history remembers him best as the Phantom Falconer, a figure who hunts not animals, but fate itself. The story of the Phantom Falconer does not begin in folklore whispered around fires or in exaggerated tavern tales. It begins in ink, on parchment, written by people who believe deeply in the permanence of the written word. The earliest references appear in fragmented medieval records from the late 12th century, buried among tax rolls, monastic chronicles, and eyewitness travel accounts that were never meant to entertain anyone. These documents were meant to record reality, and that is what makes them unsettling. One of the first known mentions comes from a Benedictine monk in northern France who was documenting unusual occurrences preceding a sudden outbreak of illness in a nearby village. In his writing, he makes a brief but striking note about a silent figure observed at the edge of a wheat field at dawn. The monk does not describe fear or panic. Instead, he describes confusion. A man dressed in dark, outdated hunting garments stood motionless, a falcon perched calmly on his arm. The bird did not struggle, it did not cry out. The figure did not hunt, did not move, and did not respond when spoken to. 3 days later, the village lost nearly half its population to an unexplained fever. What stands out in this account is not the tragedy that followed, but the monk's hesitation to label what he saw. He does not call the figure a demon, nor an angel, nor a ghost. He simply calls him the falcon bearer, as if struggling to fit the sight into any known category. This pattern repeats itself again and again in other early records. Writers describe the figure as real, physical, present, but deeply wrong. A similar description appears decades later in a traveler's journal from the Holy Roman Empire. The traveler recounts passing through a mountain pass where locals warned him not of bandits or wild animals, but of a silent watcher who appeared at twilight. The description is nearly identical: a tall man, face obscured by shadow, clothing suggesting nobility or professional hunting, and always the falcon. According to the journal, those who saw the falconer often dismissed him as a nobleman until something terrible happened shortly after: an avalanche, a disappearance, or a sudden death on the road. As these accounts spread across regions, something disturbing emerges. The descriptions remain consistent even though the writers had no connection to one another. The falcon is always present. The figure never speaks. He is never aggressive. And he always appears briefly, often on the outskirts of human activity near forests, fields, borders, and roads, places of transition, places where life quietly changes direction. In England, a chronicler writing during the reign of King John mentions a dark huntsman seen near an estate shortly before the unexplained death of a minor noble family. Again, no supernatural explanation is offered. The chronicler seems almost frustrated, as though the event defied his understanding of the natural order. He records the sighting because he believes it matters, not because he understands it. What makes these early sightings especially chilling is how seriously they were taken. These were not dismissed as madness or superstition. Monks, scholars, and officials recorded them with restraint, often expressing discomfort at even including them in official documents. Some passages appear scratched out or added later in different ink, suggesting hesitation, revision, or even censorship. The falconer enters history quietly, without spectacle. No dramatic introduction. No legend announcing his arrival. He simply appears, fully formed, already understood as something ominous but undefined. There is no origin story in these early records. No explanation of where he comes from or why he exists. He does not evolve over time like most myths. He arrives complete, consistent, and deeply unsettling, as though history did not create him but merely noticed him for the first time. To understand why the Phantom Falconer feels so deeply unsettling, we have to stop focusing on the man and look instead at the creature on his arm. The falcon is not an accessory. It is the key. Across nearly every culture where the falconer is reported, the bird he carries is described with the same calm precision, as if witnesses instinctively knew it mattered more than the figure himself. Falcons were never ordinary animals. They were chosen, elevated, trained, and feared. And their presence transforms the falconer from a wandering stranger into something far more deliberate. In the medieval world, falcons were symbols of authority and control over death. Only nobles were permitted to hunt with them, and even among the elite, falconry was treated as a discipline bordering on the sacred. A falcon does not kill randomly. It selects, dives, and strikes with terrifying accuracy. This made the bird a living metaphor for fate. When people saw a falcon perched calmly, watching with unblinking eyes, they did not see a pet. They saw judgment waiting to descend. Long before medieval Europe, ancient civilizations assigned cosmic meaning to this bird. In Egypt, the falcon was associated with Horus, the sky god who watched over kings and battlefields. Horus was not a god of chaos, but of order and force through violence when necessary. His gaze from above symbolized divine oversight. To appear with a falcon was to imply that one was acting with cosmic permission. When medieval writers described the Phantom Falconer carrying a falcon, they were unknowingly invoking a symbol that had already spent thousands of years linked to power, death, and inevitability. In Islamic cultures, falconry was more than sport. It was tradition, survival, and honor. Falcons were respected for their loyalty, discipline, and lethal efficiency. They were partners, not tools. To see a man standing silently with a falcon in the desert or at the edge of a settlement suggested someone who belonged neither to the wild nor to civilization, but moved between both. This mirrors where the falconer is always seen on boundaries, thresholds, and margins, never fully inside the human world. What makes the symbolism even darker is the falcon's behavior in every account. The bird is always calm. It never struggles, screeches, or attempts to fly away. Anyone familiar with falcons knows how unnatural this is. These birds are alert, aggressive, and restless by nature. For a falcon to sit motionless, eyes fixed forward, suggests training beyond human skill or a bond beyond understanding. Witnesses describe feeling watched not by the man, but by the bird, as if the falcon was assessing them, measuring something invisible. In medieval belief systems, animals were thought to sense death before humans could. Dogs howled, horses panicked, birds fled. The falcon does none of these things. It waits. This waiting transforms the falconer into a figure of patience rather than violence. He does not chase disaster. He arrives knowing it will happen. The falcon is not hunting prey. It is waiting for the moment it has already been promised. This is why replacing the falcon with any other animal collapses the legend. A raven would imply scavenging, a wolf would imply hunger, a horse would imply travel or war, but the falcon implies selection. Precision, inevitability, the Phantom Falconer does not bring chaos. He witnesses the moment when order reasserts itself through loss. When historians later attempted to rationalize the legend, some suggested the falconer was a noble executioner, a symbolic reminder of royal justice. Others believed he represented death itself, stripped of theatrical cruelty and reduced to observation. But the falcon remains the constant thread across every interpretation, anchoring the legend to something ancient and deeply human, the fear that our lives are observed, judged, and decided long before the moment arrives. By the time the Phantom Falconer becomes a familiar figure in historical records, something deeply disturbing begins to emerge, not from any single account, but from the spaces between them. Again and again, sightings of the falconer are followed by disaster. Not immediately, not dramatically, but with a chilling consistency that refuses to be dismissed as coincidence. These are not vague predictions made after the fact. They are documented observations placed carefully in timelines, written before anyone could understand what they were about to witness. In Central Europe during the early 13th century, A castle steward recorded the appearance of a silent huntsman standing near the outer walls, just days before a mysterious fire consumed the keep. The steward does not claim the figure caused the fire. Instead, he writes as if the appearance itself was a signal, something that marked the moment when disaster became unavoidable. The fire was later ruled accidental, yet the Falconer's presence haunted the record, inserted into the narrative like a warning no one understood in time. This same rhythm appears in battlefield accounts. Soldiers returning from failed campaigns describe seeing a solitary man with a falcon standing at the edge of camps or watching from distant hills before ambush, betrayals, or sudden defeats. These were hardened men, accustomed to fear and death, yet their descriptions are unnervingly restrained. They do not exaggerate, they do not panic. They simply note the figure's presence, as though it unsettled them in a way violence never could. What makes these encounters uniquely terrifying is their placement in time. The Falconer does not appear after catastrophe like a mourner. He does not arrive during chaos like a predator. He appears before, always before, just close enough to be seen, just distant enough to remain unreachable. In several accounts, witnesses attempted to approach him, only to find that he was gone moments later, leaving behind no tracks, no sound, no sign of departure. Entire communities began to notice the pattern. In parts of Eastern Europe, village elders warned one another not of famine or war, but of the silent man with the bird. A sighting did not cause immediate panic, but it changed behavior. People delayed travel, they postponed weddings, they locked doors earlier than usual, and yet the disasters still came. Illness swept through towns, bridges collapsed, children vanished near forest. The Falconer was never blamed directly, but he became inseparable from the event itself. One of the most chilling elements of these accounts is the scale of catastrophe involved. The Falconer does not only appear before great historical tragedies. Sometimes he appears before intensely personal ones. A mid-14th century letter from Italy describes a father seeing the Falconer on a hillside, hours before his son was killed in a riding accident. The writer does not accuse the figure of murder. He describes the sighting as if it were a sentence already written, merely read aloud by fate. Historians who later examined these records struggled with the same question modern viewers now face. How does a legend maintain such narrative discipline across centuries? Most myths grow exaggerated, details blur, characters evolve, but the Phantom Falconer remains unchanged, and so does the pattern of his appearances. He does not escalate. He does not intervene. He simply arrives, waits, and disappears, leaving behind consequences that seem to confirm his purpose retroactively. The precision of this pattern is what elevates the Falconer from superstition to something far more disturbing. If he were random, he could be dismissed. If he acted violently, he could be explained as a murderer or a symbol of war. But he does neither. His role is observational, almost bureaucratic, as if catastrophe must be acknowledged before it is allowed to unfold. The question that haunts these records is not whether the Falconer causes disaster, but whether disaster itself summons him, as though history has a mechanism for announcing irreversible moments, a silent witness dispatched to observe the point of no return. Among all the details that surround the Phantom Falconer, none is more disturbing than what he refuses to do. He does not threaten, he does not warn, he does not explain himself. Across centuries of sightings, not a single reliable account describes him speaking a word or making a deliberate gesture. In a world where even legends crave attention, his silence becomes the loudest feature of all. In medieval Europe, silence carried meaning. Speech was power, prayer was protection, and names had authority. To speak was to define, and to define was to control. The Falconer's refusal to speak places him beyond that control. Witnesses describe calling out to him, shouting warnings, even invoking religious phrases, only to be met with nothing. The man remains still, the falcon remains calm, and the silence stretches long enough to unsettle even the bravest observer. This silence separates the Falconer from demons and spirits of folklore. Demons bargain, ghosts lament. Omens shout through storms and screams, but the Falconer offers no negotiation. He does not ask for attention or belief. His presence does not demand interpretation. It simply exists, and that existence alone becomes unbearable. People instinctively want explanations for danger. Silence denies them the comfort. Several chroniclers remark that the falconer's quietness felt intentional, as though speech itself would break some rule. One monk wrote that the figure seemed bound by an order higher than language. This idea appears repeatedly in different cultures, suggesting that the falconer is not unable to speak, but forbidden to do so. He is not a messenger delivering a warning. He is a witness recording a moment that can no longer be altered. The falconer's lack of action is just as unsettling as his silence. He never intervenes, even when disaster could be prevented. In one account, a guard reported seeing the falconer near a crumbling bridge hours before it collapsed. The guard tried to alert others but was dismissed. When the bridge fell, killing several travelers, the falconer was gone. The figure had not tried to stop the collapse, nor had he gestured toward danger. He had simply been present, as if observing the final seconds of a decision already made. Philosophers later interpreted this passivity as the most terrifying aspect of the legend. Violence can be resisted. Threats can be confronted, but inevitability cannot be argued with. The falconer embodies that inevitability. His silence suggests that the outcome no longer depends on human choice. By the time he appears, the story has already been written. There is also something profoundly human about his restraint. Many witnesses describe feeling an overwhelming urge to speak to him, to beg for understanding or mercy, only to feel foolish in the attempt. The falconer does not respond because response would imply empathy, and empathy would imply change. His role requires emotional distance, the kind possessed by judges, executioners, or time itself. The falcon reinforces this message. Trained birds remain silent until commanded. They wait, they observe, they strike only when the moment arrives. In this way, the falconer and his bird mirror one another perfectly. Neither acts prematurely, neither reacts emotionally. They exist in a state of controlled anticipation, making their stillness feel deliberate rather than passive. This combination of silence and inaction forces witnesses into a terrifying realization. The falconer is not there to help, harm, or warn. He is there because something has reached the point where intervention is meaningless. His presence marks the moment when events move beyond human influence, when cause has already become consequence, and all that remains is the unfolding of what can no longer be undone as accounts of the Phantom Falconer spread across centuries. Historians encountered a problem that refuses to resolve itself. No matter how much time passes between sightings, the figure does not age, evolve, or change. His clothing remains anachronistic yet never outdated. His posture is always upright, composed, almost ceremonial. And the falcon, regardless of era or location, behaves the same way. This creates a question that sits at the heart of the legend. Are people seeing the same entity moving through time? Or are they witnessing different individuals unknowingly repeating the same role? Some early scholars attempted to rationalize the falconer as a succession of symbolic figures, possibly secret agents of authority or royal executioners whose presence was meant to intimidate or foreshadow punishment. In certain regions, noble hunters were known to act as enforcers of law, and the sight of such a figure might have carried psychological weight. But this explanation collapses under scrutiny. These falconers never identified themselves. They never enforced law. They never returned. And no historical records confirm an organized order that matches the precision and consistency of the sightings. Other interpretations lean toward the idea of a singular, immortal observer, an entity bound to history itself. This theory gained traction because the falconer never appears as a young man or an old one. He exists in a state of timelessness. Witnesses struggle to estimate his age, often describing him as ageless or unchanged. In a world obsessed with lineage, succession, and legacy, this lack of aging sets him apart from human narratives entirely. There is also a psychological explanation, one that unsettles scholars even more. Carl Jung's concept of the archetype suggests that certain images recur across cultures because they represent shared fears embedded in the human mind. The falconer, in this view, is not a being but a symbol that surfaces whenever people confront unavoidable loss. But this explanation struggles with the physicality of the encounters. The falconer casts shadows, he occupies space. People attempt to approach him, animals react to his presence. These details resist reduction to purely symbolic hallucination. Some theologians propose that the falconer is a manifestation of divine surveillance, stripped of mercy and ceremony. Not an angel, not a demon, but a function. A role assigned to observe moments of irreversible change. In this interpretation, it does not matter whether the falconer is one being or many. What matters is that the role persists. Like an office that must be filled, the falconer appears whenever history reaches a critical threshold. This idea introduces a chilling possibility. If the falconer is a role rather than an individual, then he may be occupied repeatedly by different entities or forces across time, each bound by the same rules. Silence, non-interference, observation. The consistency of these rules suggests governance, as though the universe itself enforces the terms of his presence. Witnesses sometimes report the uncanny feeling that the falconer is aware of being observed, yet indifferent to it. This awareness feels less like consciousness and more like function, similar to a clock that continues to tick regardless of who listens. If there are many falconers, they do not compete or differ. They behave identically, as though following a script written beyond human comprehension. The eternal watcher theory becomes most unsettling when considered alongside the falconer's timing. He never appears at random moments of life. He appears only when outcomes are sealed. This implies foresight, not prediction, but knowledge. Knowledge that exists outside the flow of time as humans understand it. Whether the Phantom Falconer is one being moving endlessly through history or many entities fulfilling the same duty, the effect is the same. He represents the idea that history is not chaotic but supervised. That moments of irreversible consequence are marked, observed, and acknowledged by something that does not need our belief to exist. Something that has watched civilizations rise and fall with the same quiet patience, waiting for the next moment that cannot be changed. Most legends weaken with time. They retreat into the past, becoming safer, symbolic, and distant. The Phantom Falconer does the opposite. As the world becomes more rational, more documented, and more illuminated, his appearances do not vanish. They simply change settings. The forests become battlefields. The castles become factories, the village roads become highways, and the figure remains the same. During the 19th century, reports emerged that sound disturbingly familiar, even though the language has modernized. Soldiers during the Napoleonic Wars described a silent man standing on ridgelines before failed advances or sudden retreats. Officers dismissed these sightings as exhaustion or nerves, yet the descriptions align perfectly with medieval accounts. The posture, the clothing, the bird. Always the bird calm still, watching. In the early 20th century, industrial accidents begin to feature in the narrative. Factory workers spoke of seeing a dark figure with a bird perched on his arm near rail yards or construction sites shortly before deadly collapses or explosions. These were men accustomed to danger and machinery, not superstition. Many refused to give formal statements, sharing their experiences only in personal letters or diaries, as though instinctively aware that what they had seen did not belong in official reports. Wartime accounts are perhaps the most chilling. During both World Wars, scattered testimonies describe a lone figure observing from ruined buildings or open fields before bombings and ambush. These sightings never become part of official military history, yet they persist in memoirs and oral histories. Veterans speak of feeling an overwhelming sense of finality when they saw him, as though something had already been decided, not fear, not panic, acceptance. What makes modern sightings even more disturbing is the lack of cultural expectation. Medieval peasants believed in omens. Modern engineers, soldiers, and travelers do not. Yet the falconer appears to those least inclined to believe. A truck driver on an isolated highway in the 1970s described stopping for a figure he thought was stranded, only to see a falcon perched on the man's arm before the figure vanished into the darkness. Hours later, a multi-vehicle accident occurred on that same stretch of road. Skeptics argue that these accounts are projections, shaped unconsciously by older legends. But this explanation fails to account for one detail. Many witnesses had never heard of the Phantom Falconer before their experience. They describe him in precise terms, only later discovering that their descriptions match centuries-old records. This convergence creates a feedback loop of disbelief. where rational minds struggle to reconcile what they saw with what they know. The modern world prides itself on surveillance, data, and control, yet the Falconer exists outside these systems. He is never photographed clearly, he leaves no physical evidence. He does not trigger alarms or sensors. He appears briefly, is noticed by a few, and disappears before documentation can trap him. It is as though he understands the rules of observation and knows exactly how far he can be seen without being proven. This persistence forces a deeply uncomfortable question. If the Falconer still appears, then perhaps humanity has not outgrown its need for witnesses to catastrophe. Perhaps disasters require acknowledgement, not just occurrence. The Falconer does not warn us because warnings imply choice. He appears because the moment has already passed the threshold where choice matters. In a world that believes it has mapped every mystery, the Phantom Falconer stands as a reminder that some patterns do not announce themselves as myths. They repeat quietly, patiently, adapting just enough to survive each era. Watching as history continues to create moments that cannot be undone, the story of the Phantom Falconer does not end with an answer, because legends like this are not designed to be solved cleanly. Across centuries, cultures, and continents, the Falconer remains unchanged, silent, observant, and always present at the edge of irreversible moments. He does not demand belief, worship, or fear. He simply appears, and history bends around his presence as if acknowledging something it already knows. What makes the Phantom Falconer truly unsettling is not whether he is real in a physical sense, but what his persistence reveals about us. Every era believes it has outgrown superstition. Yet, every era produces the same stories when faced with loss that cannot be explained, prevented, or undone. The Falconer fills the space where logic fails and where human control ends. He represents the moment when explanation no longer offers comfort. If he were violent, we could resist him. If he spoke, we could argue with him. If he warned us, we could pretend we still had time. But his silence denies us all of that. His presence suggests that some outcomes are already sealed before we recognize the warning signs, before we name the danger, before we even understand the question we should have asked. Whether the Phantom Falconer is a single eternal watcher, a role repeatedly fulfilled, or a reflection of a pattern embedded deep within human history, the effect remains the same. He stands as a witness to thresholds, those quiet points where the future locks itself into place. Wars, accidents, deaths, collapses, disappearances, all marked not by thunder or prophecy, but by a man who watches and a bird that waits. Perhaps the most disturbing possibility is this: the Falconer does not haunt history because he is supernatural, but because he mirrors a truth we struggle to accept, that not every tragedy is preventable, not every disaster announces itself loudly, and not every ending allows us the dignity of understanding. And if that is the case, then the question is no longer whether the Phantom Falconer exists, but whether we notice him only when it is already too late.